Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Lost Decades podcast. I say 18 with a question mark because last week I remember saying it was like episode 16 and a half, and then you said 16 and three quarters. It was a special episode about the Sumerian gods. So just to keep things easy, I'm just going to say that's just 17. I'm counting it as an official episode. It came out. It wasn't like it came out midweek or something. It came out like on a normal like weekly schedule. So we're on episode 18, and we're going to be covering the years 1550 to 1500 BC.
BC, my boy
So,
BC.
yeah, speaking of the Sumerian gods, I kind of looked into some stuff. That was just kind of some fun facts. There was this weapon called Sharur that was called Smasher of Thousands, and it is the weapon and symbol of the god Ninurta. And it's basically an enchanted talking mace, which kind of sounds like something from like a modern day like video game where it's like
Or
you're
an anime or something. I was
yeah.
like, what's going? I was reincarnated as a mace, the strongest mace in the Egyptian dynasty.
This was actually one of the another random thing before we get into Egypt. I f- I looked up what it is called. This creature that's on the walls of Babylon is called let me see, a Basmu or
It
Boshmu.
seems like the legs, like the back legs, are almost like a hawk or a bird of some sort, and the front legs are like a cat of some sort.
Yeah, and it's like has a weirdly kind of skinny neck and like long
It
body.
almost looks like a snake with the forked
Yep.
tongue
So
coming
he's
out.
called it's basically a venomous snake is kind of what they call it. It's a mythological Mesopotamian creature, a horned snake with two forelegs and wings. It also it's the Akkadian name of the Babylonian constellation of there's like the Greek Hydra is a constellation,
Hmm.
and that's how they saw that constellation was this Bosch thing.
Interesting. Okay.
So anyway, so getting into Egypt, I saw before we get into actually like the 1550 to 1500, I found out because we've been bringing up the dating system quite a bit. So I'm just going to read this. It might sound a little weird at first, but it'll make sense by the end. In year 9 of Amenhotep, a heliacal rise of Sothis, it's some sort of like astrological phenomenon, was observed on the 9th day of the 3rd month of summer. Modern astronomers have calculated that if the observation was made from Memphis or Heliopolis, the observation was made on that day in 1537 BC. So that's the high chronology. But if the observation was made in Thebes, then it happened in 1517. That's the low chronology. And so the heliacal rise of Sothis suggests the accession of Amenhotep was either in 1546 or 1526, but we're going off the
26.
26. It says because Thebes was the capital during the 18th dynasty, Egyptologists traditionally set the accession date to 1526 because it makes sense. They're basically saying it could have been made at Heliopolis, but Thebes was, as we know, the capital. So it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
there's a really high chance. I guess, again, they just always want to hedge their bets. They never want to be like 100% confident, which is fair. But when you actually look into it, you can just sort of make up your mind and be like, you know what? This is definitely the year it happened because, it makes the most sense that it would have been
Yeah.
taken to the capital city where all the astronomers lived.
I mean, it makes sense too, just because it's sort of what is it? The 16th and 17th dynasty are there. I looked up a thing explaining why this is the 18th dynasty and not just the 17th dynasty.
Hmm.
And the main reason for it is they see this as, again, the beginning of the new kingdom. And so
Yeah.
because of that, he basically said that you don't need to be a new last name, a new family for it to be a new dynasty. I'm not saying that that's always the case, but he said in this case,
Yeah.
the new king who took over, even though, yes, he's the same as his brother, it was such a monumental shift that it's a new dynasty. That's how they
Yeah.
felt.
No, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I don't want to get too into it, but it just sort of reminds me of like, it's not quite the same, but it's like William the Conqueror conquering England, and it's like now he's considered, like the first of the Norman dynasty of England, but like he
Mhm.
technically came from an earlier royal family, but it's like we're considering it a new dynasty. So
No, I agree, that's a good
makes
example,
sense.
actually, because it's sort of like because even though he's part of this old 17th dynasty Theban dynasty, it's completely different. It wasn't the same as his dad.
It's a new territory. There's a
Yeah,
lot
no,
more
and
land.
and and not even by a small margin, but his
Yeah.
dad controlled Thebes and the surrounding area. He controls all of Egypt and, Nubia to the Third Cataract and up into, the Levant. It's like
Mhm.
it's just not even comparable.
For sure.
So,
No, it really changed. Yeah, you have access to the Mediterranean. And your access to Mesopotamia. You don't have this like middleman between you. That'd be super annoying. So, who are saying that you sound like a hippopotamus? That's not very nice.
yeah, that was last episode. I read that thing like 3 times and I was so confused. I was like, "So he claimed that the hippopotamus was too loud, and that's why we're attacking." And then ironically, that's
Yeah.
they lost. They declared war on Thebes because the hippopotamus was too loud, and then they lost the war. Like, I don't know. It's so hilariously ironic.
Yeah. So, talking about what was actually going on in the year 1550 BC. So, to catch people up, after the death of Kamos, the throne went to Ahmose the first. Pharaoh Ahmose was very young, and Queen Mother Ahotep the first served as regent during the early years. So that was a common thing, and so she would have taken precedence over her daughter, who was also Amos's wife, Amos
I was
Nefertiti.
about to say that. You notice, like, I know we talked about this before, but it's funny how, yeah, again, we're in the period of them marrying their sisters as
Yeah,
wives.
that
What I
just
thought was
gets used to
interesting
it.
was they
Yeah,
said, at least what I looked up into, they said a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is just normal practice," and they said,
it
"Actually,
was
it's
just for
not."
pharaohs. Yeah.
It is, but even for pharaohs, it's a little weird where they said most of the Egyptian common people would be against it. They would think that it's sacrilege, it's
Mm,
bad. But
right.
it's almost like a what do we call them from Spain? The Habsburg situation where they
Mhm.
said, like, "This is
A
how we hold on
royal
to
blood.
power. If you don't like it, what are you gonna do about it? You're just some guy who makes clay bricks. What are you
Well,
gonna do about it?"
I
Like,
mean, I don't, and
uh
it's like they just when they literally, I think it's just hard for us to think about because we can't picture. It's not like we see the president as like a demigod who's like literally being told by God what to do. And it's like most people would really think that. So it's like if he's a god and he's going to marry his sister, who I guess is also like some sort of god, then it's like, okay, like that makes sense. They would make an exception. It's like, okay, he's marrying his sister, but like, it's almost like when you read a Greek myth or something, you read about like, and then Athena, had a daughter with
so dude,
other Ares. It's like, it doesn't seem that weird. It's like, oh, well, they're
that's
both
actually
gods.
exactly it. They said some scholars think that their whole point was they're saying we're mimicking the gods. And I'll be honest, I can't remember
Yeah.
the gods, but they're like, oh, it's kind of like how Ra married his sister
Yeah.
Nefertiti. And don't quote me on that, but all they're saying is
Yeah.
that they're like, we're just doing what the gods do. They marry their
Exactly. We
siblings
are
all
gods.
the time. Like this is normal.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we got to save the rest for our special when we do a special episode on the Egyptian gods. There'll be
Yeah,
a lot to talk
true.
about.
Well,
So,
and politically, if we go politically, they said what's interesting is Amos made his sister head of the temple and then
actually, yeah,
married.
wait, stop, pause on. Yeah,
Oh,
I have a whole thing
sorry.
with
If
Nefertari.
you have a
Yeah.
whole thing, then go into it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry.
No, that's good. So, yeah, just to talk about Amos real quick. So, Amos the first, he basically spent most of his 25-year reign putting down internal revolts, which makes sense. You're kind of reuniting the country recently, and then now you have to steady things out.
And
There's a
recapturing Nubia, which I thought was
Yep.
interesting, all the way down to like, it's funny because we talked about this, but it just in so long it hasn't been. They went all the way down to the Third Cataract to recapture those gold mines and basically
Mhm.
put Nubia to bed and be like, no, 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 no. we're in charge of this. We want the gold mines. We want the quarries. Like we want all this to help fund their empire's expansion.
Yeah, and then it's nice because now, selfishly, as you know, amateur historians and podcasters, we're going to get more data because the more powerful you are and you have a writing system, it usually means you have more things written down that you can read, and so we know more stuff about them. Um, and so yeah, there was at least one Nubian uprising. There's this rebel Atta, and there was a second rebel named Teshin, who is like a native
Mhm.
Egyptian. And yeah, they pushed it real far down. He besieged and finally took Avaris itself. He chased the Hyksos remnant into Canaan. Um, and there was this 3-year siege of Sharuhin, which is near modern day Gaza, which fell around 1550 BC. I think we talked about that last time.
Yeah, we did.
But
Yeah.
behind the throne was, yeah, his mom, as I said, and she's has written on a stela somewhere, um, that she held the kingdom together during the transition. It says, "Who cares for Egypt? Has looked after her soldiers, has guarded Egypt, has brought back her fugitives and collected her deserters, has pacified Upper and Lower Egypt and expelled her rebels." And she's one of the few women in Egyptian history explicitly credited with battlefield leadership, which is cool because, yeah, you hear about famous women and queens, but it's not that often that you hear about them actually being like generals on the battlefield. That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so yeah,
commanding
as
that
I
amount of
said,
respect.
there is this. So his wife and slash sister. I don't know if there's a name for that, like Wister Seif. Um,
I've just heard sister wife. That's all I've
sister
heard.
wife. Yeah.
Which sounds very
Oh, you're right though.
Muslim,
That is
but
the official term. Her name was Amos Nefertari. She was the daughter, I guess, same with Tohep. She was the daughter of Sekenenre Tau and Ahotep, and she was revered as goddess of resurrection and was apparently one of the most venerated women in Egyptian history. Um, so it seems like this is really, since it's the beginning of the new kingdom, it's really the beginning of a lot of this religious stuff and these new like roles. Like they kind of invent this role of the second prophet of Amun, and she was
because
also that.
he
She had multiple
pushes
roles.
being a moon. Like I know that it existed before because we talk about Amun Ra, but like this was kind of like their reestablishment of like this is what we believe because it kind of with the second intervening period it very deteriorated. So
Yeah, yeah. So it's like another way to kind of consolidate power and spread your, message that you're powerful and everything is give yourself more titles and religious. It wasn't just like a title. It's like she actually was responsible for all temple properties,
yep.
administration of estates, workshops, treasuries, and all the associated administration staff. I just think
Which
it's
is
hard
kind
for
of
us.
ingenious when you think about it. I didn't mean to interrupt, just that
Yeah.
you put your sister in charge of all this stuff, and then you marry your sister, and you're like, "Oh, well, on a side note, now I'm in charge of all this stuff." Like,
Yeah, you keep it in the family. It makes sense they try to keep so much in the family, even though a lot of times, as we saw with the Hittites and other people, your brother or your brother-in-law might kill you and take over, but it's still, especially with your wife. Usually, you can trust your wife in most cases, historically, and yeah, I think we think about modern day religion, and we try to do the separation of church and state and all this stuff in the U.S., and so it's hard for us to wrap our head around like when we say the priest and the temples and the religion, that's essentially the government. They're like almost
yeah.
the exact same thing. They're like barely separated at
The
all.
separation is minuscule at best, yeah.
So she was very, very powerful. And so some of her titles: Goddess of Resurrection, God's Wife of a Moon, Fine Adoratrix. That's pretty
Ooh,
second prophet of a moon.
characters.
So yeah, she was one of the first people in general to have some of these titles, and then so she really gets written down as like a legendary figure because it's like, you know, whenever it's like Alfred the Great in England. Not to keep bringing up
Yeah.
England, but whenever someone's kind of the first of something, he's like the first of like all of England and stuff. You remember their name, so
Yeah.
Then, almost the first heir was Amenhotep the first.
Which, not to interrupt, I thought it
Yeah.
was so funny. That name kept sounding so familiar, and I realized it's in the 12th dynasty, it was, Amenemhat, and this is
Right.
I'll be honest, I was
Yeah.
genuinely a little confused. I was like, "Wait, is this the same name?" So I looked it up, and I was like, "No, it's not." And I'll be honest, it
Yeah.
doesn't have anything to do with each other, but it threw me off. Amenhotep and Amenemhat, like, were just so similar.
Well, it's
Like, it
Amen, they have Amen in
yeah.
their name, but yeah, I think I had the same thought where I was like, "Didn't we already have Amenhotep the
That's
first?"
what I thought. That's
But
exactly what I thought. Yeah.
yeah, that's funny, and I think also we've just heard Amenhotep. I think he's, like, kind of famous, so we probably just
Yeah.
and there's, like, obviously there's other Amenhoteps because he's the first, so but he actually, so originally he's the younger brother. He had an older brother, Amos Ankh.
Apparently 2.
Okay, so yeah, both his older
Apparently
brothers
2, they
died.
said the joke I heard was when I was watching videos, they're like, he wasn't his dad's first choice, and he wasn't his dad's second choice because they both died. So
More common, sadly, than, you'd like back
well,
then.
and apparently, like with his father, his mom ruled for a little bit before he was old enough to take over.
Right, right. Actually, I was literally just about to say that, yeah, so
My
his
bad. Yeah.
mother, Amos Nefertari, who I was just talking about, so yeah, she got subdued or whatever, sorry, I can't think of the word, subjugated, not really, when she's under her mom, when her brother/husband is king, she's not that powerful, she's still very powerful. Actually, I don't know when she would have been she probably was more as the mom, she's actually ruling, so
I mean, she's also in charge of, even though I'm sure her husband/brother is in charge, she's still technically ruling the temples, and all the
right.
taxes and everything associated with that.
Yeah, when she's the sister wife, she has all this, like, church power, and then when she's the mom, she's literally, like, essentially the pharaoh. Like, when you have, like, a three-year-old kid, that kid's not doing anything, so you're literally running it, and you still, I'm assuming, are retaining all the earlier titles, so she was probably super powerful for the first, like, 10 years of his life, and, his throne name was Jesser Kare, holy is the soul of Ra, and his Horus name, Bull who conquers the lands.
And sorry if you don't know this. What does it mean by, like, their Horus name? Like, I
I
don't know what
actually don't know.
that's fair. Well, that's fair. I didn't know.
I
I
think
didn't when I looked it up, I
based
was like, "I don't know what
on
that means." I was like
yeah, because I remember, like, Horus was the god who, um, was remember he switched, it was like you're when you're alive, you're this god, and when you're dead, you become, like, a different god.
No, no, I agree. I meant that's what
Yeah,
it came up when I did research, and I was like, "I don't know what this means. I don't know if that's just
I
me."
don't know.
I was
I mean,
like
yeah, we'll look into it, but basically the fact that he was called the bull who conquers the lands, it's like obvious he wanted to at least seem aggressive, but weirdly his reign is actually kind of quieter than his father Amos. He did at least lead one campaign into Nubia. He pushed it down to the Second Cataract and built a temple at Sai Island, deep in Nubian territory. And apparently he did not really campaign up in like Canaan. Um, but apparently he did at some point he did make it up to the Euphrates. Or no, sorry. Later on, yeah, Thutmose, which we're gonna briefly talk about, he's gonna go like really far into Babylon. But when that guy gets to the Euphrates, he doesn't find anyone to fight against him. So it seems like uh probably the earlier pharaoh must have like pacified the people in that area. So it's not guaranteed, but that's kind of the evidence that um that Amenhotep probably did go up into Mesopotamia, but we just don't have a record of it.
No, and it makes sense too because the whole idea was they said this is the first time that Egypt was very like, oh, we're actually going to push out. Sorry,
It's all right. Um, keep
that
going.
they were going to push outside their borders because they were saying that we've been so consolidated on Egypt and Egypt stuff, and we're just going to stay here and focus on us. And they're like, you know what? After the Hyksos coming in and taking over, we can't just be passive people, part of the environment, if you will. We need to actively be involved in Mesopotamian politics, in Hittite politics, in Levant politics. Like, we need to be part of this. And Egypt actually pushes up into at least what I saw with Amenhotep. He
Mhm.
gets up into almost all the way to Jerusalem, you know?
Are you talking about Thutmose or Amenhotep?
I saw Amenhotep. He didn't go to Jerusalem, but he went up
Yeah.
that direction. All I meant is that.
Yeah, because they were basically paranoid after the Hyksos had
Yeah.
their time. They got paranoid that it was going to happen again, so they're soon going to conquer up there. Yeah. So just to go back real quick before we get to Thutmose, he was the first one to separate the tomb from his mortuary temple.
Which is
What
cool because I think it's interesting that they're saying that that's why the Valley of the Kings is much of a thing. I know we talked about the 17th dynasty started it, but
Yeah.
his whole thing was, hey, we can build these big monuments, but you don't need to bury me there. Bury me somewhere else where no one's going to find me. That
Right.
makes,
Smart.
even from our perspective, it's like that makes a lot more sense. You can build a monument to me. I don't need to live at that monument. I could be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because the big thing was they talk about how if your stuff is stolen, you don't get an afterlife, even if it's way later. They're saying even if for 200 years you have all these jewels and all this gold, if it gets stolen in the afterlife, you're just screwed. Like,
Yeah, and it
so
probably took them until now to realize that grave robbers were that big of a thing. Because probably the early pharaohs were like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna, like, no one would dare to, like, break into my tomb and steal
well,
stuff."
and not just that, they just talked about how so many people didn't think that far ahead, where they said, for the next century, no one will bother me. And they're like, yeah, but we're going to be around for like 3,000 years.
Like,
So,
for
like,
it.
you
Yeah,
need to plan ahead more.
right.
So,
Apparently, he
which
also found.
ironically, I love thinking of the fact that say it's real and all the British archaeologists have just destroyed their tombs and they can't like live well in the afterlife.
Sad to think about, yeah, I hope.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, apparently he also founded the Artisans Village at Deir el Medina.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
They were responsible for much of the art that filled the tombs in the Theban necropolis for the following generation. So he basically started like an art school that's gonna do all these tombs for the pharaohs in the future. And the earliest name there obviously is Thutmose, because Amenhotep kind of gets it started, but Thutmose is the next one to actually go there. And let's see. He expanded the Amen cult at Karnak. So he's really into Amen because his name has Amen in it. He's Amen.
But it does make sense because they say Atmos. I know that'd be the grandfather, but like was really big on pushing that. He said that
Mhm.
like this is the way we need to go. What I couldn't find was why. It was just that he felt that Amen being part of Thebes and stuff like that played a major role in allowing this dynasty to thrive.
Well, apparently, so their local deity was Amen, and so they saw Amen as guiding them to victory and like taking over the new kingdom and beating the Hyksos. Like it's basically they're thanking their local god. So then it raises up his status.
Well, yeah, and I'm not trying to say it's bad. I just meant more
Wait, I'm
like,
not saying it's bad. I'm just saying like that's why. Because you said
yeah,
you didn't
I
know
guess
why.
it's just that. It's funny how whoever's in power, kind of like with Mesopotamia, when they push Marduk, no one in Mesopotamia had really known much about Marduk. And the next thing you know, he's taking over everything, Hammurabi, and everyone's like, "Oh, Marduk, that's the god. Like, that's the one
Yeah.
you want to please."
And so the fact that he was supporting, the arts, apparently there is also like literary developments. That's when they wrote the Book of the Dead, which also is called the Book of What is in the Underworld, aka the text of the hidden chamber which is in the underworld. Um, so actually they didn't write it, but it reached its final form during his reign. And since it first appears in Thutmose again, Thutmose keeps coming up, but Amenhotep starts the school, and then they actually like do it for the next guy. And
I mean, there's a reason this dynasty is remembered. The 18th dynasty is like everyone's favorite, supposedly, at
mhm,
least doing research. That's like everyone's favorite dynasty.
yeah. And in the book, apparently they divide up the underworld into 12 hours, they call it.
Oh, interesting.
They also see it like at night. There's like 12 hours of night. And so it's almost like they see like I don't know exactly how it works, but I just know that even if it was summer or winter, they still counted like 12 hours of night. And anyway, that's how they divided up the underworld also. And apparently the architecture, this is skipping ahead, but I thought it was cool, just related to the Book of the Dead. Thutmose the Third's tomb, so later on, is
Mhm.
meant to mirror the structure of the underworld. So like they kind of have a map of the underworld and it's these different levels, and like he literally made his tomb to like look like that, which is pretty
That
cool.
is legit. I'm not even gonna lie, I'm, like, Googling it right now. That, like,
Okay,
sounds
go for it.
crazy.
I know it sounds cool. I
That
mean,
sounds crazy.
it's probably not as cool as like you imagine, but it's just like the concept is cool. And I'll go through this quickly because we are actually already at like 30 minutes and we're still on
Which is honestly
Egypt.
fine with me, yeah.
But there's also the Ebers Papyrus, which is the main source for information on ancient Egyptian medicine and comes from this time. And they think it's basically like the precursor to like how we think of like the Greek, their medicine theory was like the humors, and that passes on into like the medieval ages. So it
Yeah,
starts
no,
all
dude,
the
I
way
don't mean
back
to go on a
here.
tangent. I didn't realize that came from Greece because I know a
Yeah.
lot of medieval stuff, and I always wondered where the whole 4, um, humors came from.
Humors.
I was so confused
Yeah.
about that. Like,
Well, because you always hear about
the
it.
black, the green, and the white or some or I said that maybe.
Mhm.
White, black, green, red? Black? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know exactly the four humors, but yeah. I mean, it makes sense when you don't have like any technology and you're just trying to figure out like how does the human body work? You're like, well, clearly the heart's doing something because it's pumping and like you can cut open people, but they're dead. So we gotta get moving on, but he died without a surviving heir. And so he had no kids. So he had to look outside his male lineage. And so we get to the guy we keep mentioning, Thutmose the First. He explodes onto the scene in 1504. So actually, let's just literally save Thutmose for the next episode, even though we
I
keep.
think that's solid. I mean, it's fine
Uh,
because we talked about him a little bit, and he doesn't really start till 1504. So
when something big happens, it's hard not to like mention it, where it's like he's really the guy that goes like deep into Nubia and goes up and crosses the Euphrates. He's the first Egyptian king to ever cross the Euphrates. It's almost
which is
like,
crazy. If you've been on this podcast the whole time, you think about the Euphrates is so far away from Egypt. We've talked about
yeah,
the Mesopotamia and Egypt not crossing at all, and not that they didn't trade, but we're not at a point where they're literally intersecting. Like
it's
that's
cool to think
crazy.
about. I know that's what I'm liking right now is like we've been in the Bronze Age for a while and we're used to them kind of being very static and like staying. Besides,
Mhm.
then the Hittites come in and that's a big deal. That was a huge deal. And yeah, like Egypt now actually go there. We haven't really had any wars. That's the weird thing. We've had wars, but they're like local. They're like the Hyksos pushing out the Egyptians and the Kassites coming in and taking over Babylon, but we haven't had that many giant kingdom versus giant kingdom fighting
Yeah.
each other that much. So we're gonna get to that that's what's cool. We're essentially entering the late Bronze Age, and that's when all the really interesting stuff is gonna happen. And we're not gonna get to that peak again for a long time because then we'll have the Bronze Age collapse, and then we'll get the Iron Age, which will just be a different vibe, and they'll kind of see the Bronze Age as a lot of their legends. Like speaking of the Odyssey, I'm seeing it on Tuesday. I know
I'm jealous.
Andrew's seeing it in like a week.
Yeah, I'm grumpy about it. And not actually
Everyone's talking
grumpy.
about it.
I wanted to see it in IMAX, and I can't believe it's so sold out. I knew it'd be popular,
I
but
mean,
it
you
is
could
sold
just
out
see it in.
everywhere.
Yeah. I'm seeing it Tuesday, but then I'm going to try to rewatch it again on IMAX. But anyway, if you know anything about like the Trojan War and all the Odysseus and Achilles and all those guys, that still actually hasn't happened yet, which is, I wish we could have timed it so that we were like right at when like the
That
Trojan
would be the
War,
best. But yeah,
but
we're
it's
still
pretty
like a
close.
thousand years away from that, which I
That's
think.
what's that's what's funny is Homer and like the people that actually would have been hearing the Odyssey, they're in like the 8th century BC. So they're way after, but we're not even at the time period that the legends would have been based off happening. So anyway, I'm gonna skip through Egypt. We can talk about Thutmose next time, but um one quick thing, apparently they were baffled by the Nile flowing south to north. They just weren't used to that. So they called the Euphrates that inverted water which flows upstream when it ought to flow downstream.
That is crazy. And you know what's funny? It's like from the modern context, it makes sense, but it's something I never considered because they're so not only that, it's funny to think about the idea that they know which way the river flows. So when they look at a different river, they're like, "Oh, that's going the wrong way."
Right. That would have just seemed crazy to them that that could even happen. So I did want to talk real quick about the Mitanni because there's some references in Thutmos's the first is excuse me Thutmose the first reign was the first ever like historical mention of the Mitanni. So the Mitanni were these Hurrian people that would have weirdly been ruled by Indo-Aryan people because they have like different name. Their names seemed like more like that, so it seems like they kind of conquered the Hurrians in that area.
So
And
sorry, what region is this kind of in? I
oh,
know it's
actually, sorry. So I was gonna say this is our map from 1600, and now we're
yeah.
ending this episode at 1500. So the Mitanni are the green. So they're in like upper Mesopotamia, right in
Okay.
between the Hittites and Kassite Babylon. So a lot of cities we haven't really heard of, but they eventually will get like Aleppo and all this. And I don't really see any.
Wow, I feel really dumb. I forgot. I mean, whatever. Insight into the background. I have notes from my last episode that says, "Look into the Mitanni Kingdom. They take over during this time." Like,
It's fine. You can't cover everything. And we can also talk more about them next week because they're going to be growing. But I definitely want to introduce them because they really come onto the scene. Their founder is semi-legendary. The earliest attested ruler is Kurta, and basically after Yamhad collapses, which their capital at was at Aleppo, after the Hittites kind of come through them, which we didn't really talk too much about, but we did mention that the Hittites conquered Aleppo and then they conquered Babylon, so they also collapsed the Yamhad, and so the Mitanni are like the new Yamhad, and but they probably are ruled by these Indo-Aryans who had like chariots, and so they're going to eventually become kind of a threat to Egypt, and they're kind of a pretty powerful regional power, but we don't know too much about them. So we will get into Babylon, who we also don't know too much about. Um, they're kind of ghosts on the record. They're we kind of know their name, or we don't even really know some of their names. It's literally like their names were destroyed. You know, they're smudged off the stone over time, so we don't even know their name. We just kind of know there was someone there in that space. I can read off some of the kings. So basically, these are the Kassite kings that end up conquering Babylon in like the power vacuum after the Hittites basically destroy it. So before they do that, there's this guy Gandash. He's the founder. This is way back in like 1720. Then there's Agum the First. He's in like 1700. There's Cash Talash. Then there's someone we don't know his name. There's Abi Ratash. There's Cash Tiliash the Second.
oh, my
Percy
favorite.
Guramash. And then Agum the Second, um, we know a little bit about. He was the one who basically took over Babylon after the Hittites sacked. That was Agum the Second in sometime in around now, around 1540, something like that. So, but he was the 10th sovereign of the dynasty of Kassite kings. And then there was Burnaburiash, and he um, was the first to actually occupy the city of Babylon proper around 1500. So I guess even though they had conquered it, they didn't technically control Babylon, or maybe Babylon had been so destroyed it like there's nothing really going on there. So anyway, we basically the thesis of Babylon right now is we have no idea what was going on. We kind of know some of their names and that they
They're
had some.
kind of going through their own. I don't know if intermediate appear to be the right word, but just kings that are kind of trying to consolidate power, sort of, I don't know, redirect the ideology of Babylon into something more than what it was.
Yeah, maybe well, just turn it to be more like them, you know?
No, no, don't get me wrong. All I meant is they're riding on the coattails of Hammurabi and trying to be like, "Hey, we're better than that. We're gonna grow
Yeah.
this." You
They're just
know?
trying to like, yeah, rebuild it and yeah, try to be the new kids in town. I had something about Assyria because around the same time in Assyria there was Puzur Ashur the Third. He was king from 1521 to 1498, and he was the son and successor of Ashur Narari. He ruled for 24 years, and I guess he's the first Assyrian king to actually appear, like, where we know when he officially ruled. I don't really, I don't know, because I feel like we do know when some of the other, but we just know
Well, yeah,
more
we're
precise.
just in a weird period where this is the Assyrian. It's not intermittent period, but like this is
They're
their
growing.
between the old kingdom and their new kingdom period because they're kind of not that they're under the thumb of, but they're living the shadow of the Mitanni kingdom slash empire.
Mhm. Yeah, and apparently he rebuilt part of the temple of Ishtar in the capital Ashur, and he rebuilt southern parts of the wall. So, that's basically kind of what's going on. If you're looking at the video, I feel like this is probably the best map to look at, but it's kind of our usual uh, suspects, but just different rulers kind of going on. And yeah, the other players are the Hittites. We talked about Mycenaean Greece, which are the basically the people that would have been like Odysseus are the Mycenaeans. And Cyprus has a lot of copper. I guess the people there are called the Alashaya. And obviously there's Nubia. So even though Egypt kind of conquered like northern Nubia, there is like the Nubian like slash Kush kingdom down like below Egypt a little bit. But they're much, much weaker right now after Egypt's so powerful. As of, there's the Shang dynasty, there's the Indus Valley, as we know. But other than that, I think I'll just save some. I have some stuff on Canaan, just kind of what's going on there. Um, all it's really saying is that, you know, there Israel hasn't been like an entity yet. They're still just Canaanites. There's no Torah, um, and that's going to happen later. And some people think the Exodus was like between the 15th and 13th century BC. We're not really sure. And yeah, I think next week we're really going to get into like the start of the late Bronze Age and when these powers are learning from the earlier people
Hmm.
and getting stronger and holding on to power better and all that good stuff. And I appreciate everyone sticking through where we had that last week was a special episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do another one someday. Leave a comment if you liked it or if you have other ideas for like special episodes you want to hear. But uh as I said at the beginning, I literally got back from Paris last night and I didn't even go into my flight. It was kind of horrible because I was expecting it was a 7.5 hour flight, so I was like
Ooh,
prepared.
lucky you. Been in
And well, yeah,
New
it's way
York.
worse going to California, but
Yeah.
I'm used to kind of like a 5.5 hour flight to like California. So like I was still like I was fine with it though. I was like, whatever, I'm used to it. But it did still feel kind of long. And then we literally were on the tarmac for 2 hours.
Oh, wait. Oh,
Yeah,
whatever.
after
We can
all
talk about it
that,
later, but that's crazy. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll just and
I'm
then
curious.
not only that, then like we were in this long line in customs that took like 30 minutes, and then we get into an Uber and it's like New York City is like flooding. I don't know if you've seen every time it like
Wait,
rains
it's
a
raining?
significant amount,
I didn't
it
even know it
like
was raining, so that's yeah,
it
that's funny.
floods the city like in certain places really bad. It's really dumb. But anyway, I finally got home and I like tried to like order food because I didn't really have any food, and then it showed up late, so I was like so tired and like out of it. But then today I was really productive, but it's hitting me now, the
Yeah,
tiredness.
you gotta come back during the well, maybe I shouldn't say it, but we got the
Anyway,
epidemic of things that are on lettuce that cause
oh right, that's also
unpleasantries.
happening. So I got
So
to avoid that, but apologies if I was more tired this episode because I literally am still
I did
in
not plan as well this
France.
episode either. That's my fault.
In France, it's
Um,
like 2:30 in the morning or something. So, um, all right. Well, next episode will just be a normal episode 19. We're just going back on to the normal schedule. Actually, we're going to be slightly on a different schedule. So we're usually episodes would come out on like a Wednesday night. The last one came out on a Saturday. This one's coming out on like a Monday. And then the following episode is probably also going to come out on a Sunday or Monday. But then after that, we should be on our normal like Wednesday night schedule. So appreciate everyone, adjusting, you're being flexible. I used to say that so much
we
as a
know
fourth.
you're a major part of your daily schedule routine, so we do what
Yeah.
we can.
I would always say that to the fourth graders. I'd be like, thank you for being flexible and
Anyone's
things.
going to Comic-Con can meet me there because I know
Mm.
we're a pretty big
Yeah, if you want
celebrity.
to meet up with us at
If you
Comic
wanna meet
Con,
with
well,
me at
I'm not.
Comic-Con, I'm gonna be
It's
there,
true.
like, Saturday and Thursday, so,
Will you sign autographs?
I will sign as many autographs as you want, I'll sign anything you want.
Okay.
I would be surprised if someone showed
I would not. You're gonna get swarmed.
up.
All right, and I think next episode, I think we covered some good ground here, but we're gonna really start getting into Egypt's gonna be super powerful, and
Best dynasty.
things. I know I feel like we keep saying that, but maybe we'll talk off mic. But to end it here, do you think for next episode, maybe we should just do a shorter one since we're kind of getting back into things? You want to do
Yeah,
like
like, I don't know if it's 1500 to 1480, 1470,
that's
something
fine.
like
We can
that?
do like 1480, fourteen
Yeah.
seventy. We'll
I'm
decide,
okay
but
with that
something like
because
that.
it gives us time to kind of cover some of the stuff that I'll be honest, I didn't do as much research
Yeah.
for this
I feel like
time.
sometimes when we jump 50 years during these periods, these intermittent periods, we're sort of like, okay, like, we skim over it, but then I don't want to, sometimes I feel like I'm like rushing through it. I'm like, oh no, like, I don't want to get all the way to like the Iron Age yet, So
Yeah.
I think that sounds good. Something like that. Hope you guys enjoy the episode, like and subscribe, all that stuff. And you know, luckily I had Google Maps when I was in Paris so that I didn't get lost.